Hello everybody, and thank you for joining the top tips on how to edit your landscape photography. As photographers, we all want to make our photos have that whoa factor. So join us and follow along this tutorial so your photos can also be whoa. First of all, I am Giselle Behrens and this is Photo TV NYC. I invite you guys to subscribe to this channel so you never miss a live, and as well, like that video. Hit that button right now. Go, 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 go. We are crowdsourcing photos to edit them live as well, and if you are interested in having a chance for me to edit your photo, send it to this email that is right below, myphototvnyc@gmail.com. Okay, if everybody already downloaded their photo down in the link, or if you have your photo ready to go on Lightroom, let's begin. So this is the photo that we're going to be editing today. This is in Spain, and it's a really beautiful scene taken from a huge castle. So I used in this moment I was using my Canon 5D Mark III, and the format is RAW. Let me just write that up for you guys so you can see. There we go. There's a new tool that I'm using just to visualize exactly what I'm saying. So the format that I took this photo is RAW, and if you take it on Canon, it's going to be a .cr2. So the difference between taking a photo between RAW and JPEG is that RAW is going to give you much more flexibility to edit your photo. You're going to have much more information. You're going to be able to expose those lights lighter, and you're going to be able to go and have some detail in those shadows. So the first thing I do when I am in my Lightroom, let me just turn this on. When I am in my Lightroom develop module, I go to my basic tab, and it's right here, okay? And I'm going to adjust the exposure as I feel that it looks good. So I'm going to push it all the way to the whites just to see what type of information is available there. And then I'm going to push it all the way to the darks and the shadows to see how low my highlights can go. Now that I know what information is there, I'm going to decide to maybe just open it up a little bit. Now I want those blacks to really be black. When you're editing a landscape photography, you really want those blacks to be rich and your colors to be saturated. So I'm going to pump up the contrast. Contrast is going to make my whites whiter and my highlights highlighter and my shadows darker, but you don't want to lose the detail either. So I think I'm pretty satisfied with this over here. Now my first tip is going to be use Dehaze clarity and texture, okay? And let me just try that one more time over here. Use Dehaze clarity and texture to make the photo pop out, okay? When I am using Dehaze clarity and texture on my develop module under the basic tab, I usually start from the bottom all the way to the top because Dehaze is going to have the most harsh effect on the photo. So you want to do subtle adjustments, and these subtle adjustments are going to add up in order to make your photo pop out and look whoa. So if I push my Dehaze all the way to the right, because I really like to push it and see what happens when I push a slider all the way to the right, you're going to see that the blacks really went black And also the saturation is affected. You see that the yellows got more saturated as well, and some of the details and the highlights might have been compromised. So I'm just going to reset that by double clicking the word dehaze and just adjusting it where I think that it looks good. Now I'm going to go up to clarity. Clarity is going to give you a contrast in between the mid-tones. So it usually does not affect as much the shadows and the highlights as the dehaze does. And this would be the second step. So I am just going to add it. Sorry about that. So I'm just going to add a little bit of clarity. And now I'm going to go to my texture. When you are editing with these three tools, the best is to go in and zoom at 100% to see what the effect is on the photo. So you can see there, texture is going to give you some sharpness in your photo. So I'm pretty satisfied with this edit. You can drag around with your mouse all the photo just to see how these edits are looking, and we can do the before and after as well. If you press backslash, you can see the before and the after. Okay. Okay, so there's that little spinning wheel that we all see in our Macs, right? When it's thinking a little bit too much. So here's the before, and you can make sure that you are looking at the before when this little symbol comes over here. Now, I do have to wait a little bit because my Lightroom is giving me a little bit of a glitch. Let me just try to reset it over here. Okay, so of course, this happens exactly when I'm live with you guys. If this did happen to you, write a comment. And we can make some time while Lightroom refreshes. Your Lightroom. Fernando says nice, and I say it was nice. Let's see and wait what happens to see with this photo. Okay, I think I'm gonna have to just restart really quickly. And I'm gonna go back here. Okay, just bear with me for 10 seconds. It looks like we are back and running. Okay, so there it goes. Okay, so then we continue. We already did our dehaze, our clarity and texture, just to link back to where we were. Now, usually what I do, I go to the general adjustments and I always go to my detail. I zoom in again and I take a look at the noise, because you definitely do not want any disruptive noise on your photos unless you're looking for an aesthetic, for a certain aesthetic to tell the story of your photos. So that being said, because as you can see it was a very, very sunny and bright day, my ISO was pretty low. If you press the hotkey I, you're going to see that the information of the photo appears. As I mentioned, it says .cr2, which means that it's a RAW from a Canon. You can see the size, and you guys have the original file, so you're going to have the same information. If you're not following it with me right now, you can download it and see the live video afterwards as well. And if you press again I, you're going to see all of the information of the photo. The ISO in this particular case is 125, and ISO is what's going to determine how noisy your image is. So 125 is pretty low. It's a very good and fine detailed noise, and this is why I'm just going to press I again to delete that information. This is why you really can't see as much the ISO. If you go to the sky, you can see it a little bit, but still I always like to go to my detail tab and just slide that tab perhaps to 15 if it's a low noise, and you can start seeing how the houses start looking a little bit cleaner and sharper. Okay? The other adjustments that I always like to do is under the lens corrections, and these are general adjustments that I start doing with the photo before I go into the selective edits. So under the lens correction tab, I am going to adjust enable profile correction. So if we turn it on and off, in this case I used a zoom, so you can't see much difference, but what it does is that it's going to fix any vignetting. When you use a wider angle, usually you have a little bit of vignetting and a little bit of shadows on the corners, and this enable profile corrections is going to diminish that. It's going to eliminate that, as well as any distortions that you may have. When you use a wider angle, for example 28 millimeters on your lens, then you're going to start seeing a little bit of distortion. And what Lightroom has is a huge database of lenses that automatically corrects when you do select this little checkbox of enable profile correction. Why we're not seeing any adjustments on this case, any like very visible adjustments, is because I did have my zoom on. And again, if you press the eye, you'll see that it was taken at 45 millimeters, and I had a very wide angle of 15 millimeters, but it was a zoom, so I zoomed it in, and that's why there's no distortion. So I close this up. Actually, let's also check the remove chromatic aberration, just in case if there is any chromatic aberration on the photo. You are going to see a little bit of difference of that margin of error, which usually you have to really zoom in. Let's take a look if there's any chromatic aberration over here. Actually, there's no visible chromatic aberration on this one, so it was a pretty good shot. But you can always check it just in case there is, because it is very difficult to see when you do have it unless you print it very large. So we're going to go back to fit on the window, and you can also make sure that it's on fit right over here on this tab on the left hand of Lightroom. So now that we did all of our general corrections, we can go ahead and do a crop. So you can hit the keyboard shortcut, which is R for crop, okay? And in this particular photo, I'm going to decide as the photographer that this tower and this house over here, or this place, is going to be the main focal point of the photo. So what I want to do is guide the spectators and the viewers' eyes towards this tower. We're going to be doing this, one, by cropping the photo and making a tighter fit on it, and two, afterwards by playing with the contrast, the brightness, and the shadows. Okay, so follow along here with me. Right now, as you can see, my crop is free, and I actually do want to keep the same proportions of the original photo. So under your crop tab here on the right, you are going to just click on that little lock. I'm going to click it and toggle it just so you can see the difference. It's unlocked, and then you can lock it. When it's locked, it means that you're going to maintain the same proportion. It's not going to be free. Okay, and you can make sure here by clicking on original that it is on the original format. So now that it's on the original format, I'm just going to crop it slightly all the way here, because I want this tower to be right on this 1/3 of the photo on the right. But I want to make sure, you have to pay attention to the details, because I want to make sure to not cut off this awesome house that is right here. So I have a little bit of space on the bottom that I can open up and then maybe just drag it, and I don't want to cut this window. To make your photo go whoa, The secret lies in the details and in subtle adjustments. So you really want to make sure that you frame your photo exactly where you want it to frame, and there's where the intention of the photographer comes in. Here I'm going to leave these windows without cropping, and on the top right, if I go over here, I don't want to crop that little house either because it gives it some magic. It gives it detail, it tells a story about the place. So this is why I'm going to select this crop, and I'm going to see my focal point over here, and my second focal point is this tower over here. So what I want to tell with this photo is tell a story of how your eye is going to travel from this tower all the way through the street, as if your eyes were a little car, and it arrives to this tower, and then back, and then it goes down all the way to the corner, to this window that we were talking about before, and then it's going to go back to this tower. So for me, it's important to help the viewers understand what type of story you're telling, how you're guiding it, and Lightroom for me works exactly to give me the tools that I need to make the story come true. And how are we going to do this? Well, my tip number 2, okay, let's see, is, see if this works, here it goes, selective color adjustments. So this is my tip number 2. And what that means is that you're going to go down to your tab in HSL, which means hue, saturation, and luminosity. So right now I feel that the yellows are a little bit too dead for me. I want to really make them more alive to give that wow factor to the photo. So for that, first I'm going to toggle with the hue, and I'm going to make them a little bit less yellow. So here on the hue, you can actually completely change any color with these sliders. So I'm going to push the yellow all the way to my left, and you can see now that the yellows have started becoming orange. And if you go all the way to the right, you're going to see that they start becoming green. Now I just want to do a subtle adjustment, and I want them to be a little bit less yellow. So around -21 is good enough for me. I also want to pump up the saturation only on the yellows, and what this is going to do is that it's not going to affect any other color on the photo, it's just going to affect the yellows. And again, if I push it all the way to the right, it's going to give you a very dramatic adjustment, as well as desaturate it all the way to the left. I'm going to reset it by double clicking on the word yellow and just augmenting the saturation. I think around 38 to, yeah, like 40 points up looks good to me. And you can play around with your photo and see what looks good to you. For me, I'm going to go back to the moment when I took the photo and try to make it as realistic as possible, but always giving it a little bit more dramatic look and feel, just to give that wow effect. I'm also going to darken up the yellows under the luminescence tab. You can darken up the yellows, but if you go all the way to the left, they start looking really, really strange. The same happens if you go all the way to the right. So I'm just going to reset it, zoom out with Z, and I'm going to do a slight adjustment and darken them just a little bit, just to start playing around with the brightness and the shadows. Okay, now that I'm happy with this, I'm going to continue playing around with the darks, as this is going to be my third tip of the day. And the third tip of the day is brighten. Wait, let me try that again over here. Brighten and darken, which means dodge and burn. What we're going to be doing right now is dodging and burning all the areas that we want to make darker and lighter to guide the spectator into the story that we're telling. So right now, I'm just going to darken in general all the darks and see what happens. What happens if I go all the way to the left? What happens if I go all the way to the right? And if I reset it back? I'm just gonna do it a slight adjustment. -13 looks good. And then lighten up the lights to around 11. You're manually giving some contrast to the photos by making the darks darker and the lights lighter. And also, I did notice that over here I might be losing a little bit of information, which I always like to keep. So I am going to lower the highlights just to keep that information here of that beautiful stone. So right now I am pretty satisfied with the general adjustments, and we're going to go to the selective adjustments and just paint inside by pressing the hotkey K. K as in king, and that's going to give you the paintbrush. You're going to double tap on the word effect just to reset all of the adjustments. And because I want to do a darkening, I'm going to just go around 1.5 on the exposure, -1.5, and then just start painting in all of the darkness. These are subtle adjustments that are really going to make your photo stand out from any other, because it's really in the details. The wow factor always comes in the details. So right now it's difficult to see because it was so subtle, but if you press O, you will be able to see a pink mask that turns on, and you can see exactly where your adjustment had effect. So if I toggle that O back to off, it's going to turn off. I can also exaggerate the underexposure just to see where all of the effects are taking place, and then bring it back up to 1.5. Yeah, so around 1.5 is good. At the same time, I'm going to lighten up. I'm going to hit new, and I'm going to lighten up the elements where I want the eyes to follow. So the spectator's eyes, I want them, I'm going to go exposure 1.6, and I want them to see this building and the tower, and you can see how it starts becoming alive. You don't want to exaggerate it too much because or else the photo is going to look over manipulated, unless you are looking for an over manipulated aesthetics, which is totally fine. So right now I'm going to see what happens if I turn it up higher, all the way to 4. It looks a little bit too exaggerated, so I'm going to lower it back down to around 1.8. But the highlights, again, these highlights are really blowing up. So I'm going to go to the highlights adjustment and lower them down, and that's going to keep all of the information on the highlights. Now, this being said, I'm going to hit new again. The exposure is already in adding light, and now I'm going to paint on my second building with the tower and just paint subtly on the street, all the way on the street, because I do want the spectator to view from the building all the way to the street, to this building, my main focus, and then to the bottom of the street. And if you hit the backslash keyboard, now you're going to see the before and the after. You can see how on the before it looks much more flatter. And just put the before. So it looks much more flatter. The grays, the image looks completely gray. It's lacking that pop that we are adding. And when we go back to our adjustments, you can see that it really starts popping out. I think that the yellows were a little bit too yellow, so I can go here to my saturation, lower a little bit the saturation. I can also augment the green saturation over here. And I'm pretty satisfied with this photo. So again, what we did was general adjustments, reduce the noise, exposure, contrast, and the first tip was dehaze, clarity and texture, right? To make that photo pop out. We did the lens corrections as well. Afterwards, we went into a selective adjustment of the colors, so we could adjust the yellows and the greens, which are very common colors on landscape photography. We also painted in and we guided the eye of our viewer with the K, which is the paintbrush. And now we have a beautiful photo of Spain, which the spectator can see a story that comes from the back building, which is all the way over here, to our main focal point and back down to the street. Well, I hope that everybody enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions, please do say them in the comments below. If you have a photo that you'd like us to edit, please do send them to the email that is in the description as well. Remember to always subscribe to the channel, support and share all of these tutorials if you do think that they are helpful for you or for anybody that you know that might like photography and that wants to add that wow effect. Like the video, and I'll see you on the next live session, which is today at 3 p.m. Bye everybody, thanks for joining.